as well, in as much as I have been interviewed and offered a job working for Liverpool Diocese, which I have accepted. So I am going to be moving on from St. John's. It won't be for some time. I'll actually be taking up the new role in the beginning of February, but the announcement had to be made today. So what I want to do this morning is talk about that reading from Acts 6 and also just use it as a base to talk about what was going on then and then also to apply it to our current context with the fact that I've announced that I'm moving on from St. John's. And the place I want to begin is clarity of call. What you've got is a bit of a disagreement in church. Goodness me, whoever knew that was the sort of thing that happened? No. But, I mean, it's a problem brought about by growth and good things happening, that you've got a significant number of people who are dependent on food distribution, and the apostles have kind of got brought into this. And when they're talking, they're not saying, oh, this is beneath us, this is not something we should be doing. But they know what God has called them to do, and therefore they want to kind of be obedient to that call. And they're aware that because of these particular things happening, they're not able to express that call. So they come up with a bit of a plan that'll mean that all the good stuff in terms of social justice and social action can happen, and they can focus on the things that God is calling them to do. And there is this appointment of the 7 deacons who are going to be responsible for this work of food distribution. And again, there is a clarity of call there. And what I want to do is just take a few moments to talk about the clarity of call on my own life. I've always really lived with a foot in 2 camps. I love local church ministry. I think it is the best job in the world. And I have said several times, being the vicar of St. John the Baptist, I think is the best job in the Church of England. I love doing it. But I've also always felt a slightly different call to be involved in ministry at a kind of wider level to help facilitate the church outside of the life of the local church. And I've always had this sort of, foot in 2 camps. And there are times where I've worked in local churches, and then there's times that I've worked in national or regional roles. And what happened last December is I felt God niggling at me. And what I felt God say to me is, I want there to be a new vicar at St. John's. It was the equivalent of Alan Sugar pointing his finger at me and saying, you're fired. And I'm like, this is not a good idea, Lord. I love being at St. John's. I don't want to go. And I really felt very clearly God saying, there needs to be a new vicar at St. John's. And I could not make sense of what that meant. And I'm thinking, well, are you telling me to retire? Because I don't particularly want to do that, but that seems to be what you're saying. Because, to be honest, when you've been vicar at St. John's in Burscough, you don't want to go to another parish job because you've been, at the best church in the Church of England. So anything else feels like, a bit rude, but a step down. And I'm like, well, so do I just retire and concentrate on growing marrows or something? I have no interest in growing marrows, by the way. But I just had to live with that for a while and just, well, what are you saying? What are you saying? You're very clearly, I feel, saying to me, I need to move. I need to make space for somebody else to come into St. John's. But I don't understand what this means. And then, really in one of those sort of weird God incidences, at a spot just about there, I happened to have a conversation with Richard Gedge, who heads up Fit for Mission in Liverpool Diocese. And out of politeness, I said, oh, how are you doing with the Fit for Mission team? You know, have you got all the posts filled that you want? And he said, no, we're actually looking for a couple of roles to be filled. And he described them. I just thought, I need to do that job. It don't often happen like this in terms of guidance, but I just thought, that's it. That's what I should be doing. And that is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be working as part of Fit for Mission in a particular role. I can't actually describe what that role is yet because all the legal stuff needs to happen. That will be happening on the 3rd of July. And then after that, I can explain what role I'm going to be fulfilling. But I went from you're fired to you're hired. And I had this sense of, I feel clarity of call, that this is something God is asking me to do. The next thing that happens in that reading from Acts is there is a clear choice. They recognize there is an issue, there is something they need to address, which is this business of, appointing people to serve in a particular role, to act as deacons. And by doing that, the apostles are able to focus on what God has called them to do. So there are clear choices that are made, including the appointment of the 7 deacons. And in consultation with, Jeannie and Steve and Diane before that have been absolutely brilliant in kind of helping me work this through. I have identified a way of kind of helping St. John's kind of cope with a vacancy, but doing it a particular way. So I am going to become a deacon. I'm going to step down from my role as vicar, and instead, St. John's is getting a new curate, and it's me. Now, by doing that, what happens is because I resign as vicar, there is then a vacancy. But by me staying, there is some continuity in ministry. We can navigate our way through the next few months, Fit for Mission, getting our small groups all started up again. And so by following this plan, on really everything stays the same. I just have a slightly different job title. But by creating the vacancy, as Jeannie and Steve explained, we can then actually begin the appointments process of a new vicar. I have to say, the appointments process, I have absolutely nothing to do with that. So this is not some kind of stitch-up where my best mate or something like that gets to come to St. John's. I take a multitude of steps back and will have nothing to do with the appointments process. That sits with our parish representatives, with PCC. And please do pray for them as they make those sorts of decisions. There are a whole series of meetings, Church of England, I've come that you might have meetings and have them abundantly, that need to happen. And one of those, which is why the announcement is being made today, is the recommendation for the appointment of a new vicar at St John's has to be approved at a diocesan meeting that is happening on the 6th of July. Which means on the 3rd of July, I have to do all the stuff around my new job, which I say won't actually start till February. I then have to resign as vicar. And then, at the diocesan meeting, they can approve the appointments process for a new vicar. So that's why the announcement has to be made today, because we've got to fit in with those schedules. We couldn't do it next week, that's whatever it is, 2nd of July, because most of us are going to be at surf stage. We only have 2 services that day at 9 o'clock and at 5 o'clock at Crabtree. Hence why it's happening today. But I, guided by God and with other people's wisdom, am making this clear choice not to be vicar, to be curate, and therefore enable a vacancy to exist while there is continuity of ministry, and hopefully it means that the appointments process can happen in the background, no interference from me, and then when I move in January to take up a new post in February, hopefully the gap for the arrival of a new vicar is as short as possible.